All right, recording is kicked off. Lior, looks like you're first up with some inference related stuff for Gateway API.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. We released, so before KubeCon, just for context for people who has no context. So before KubeCon, we kind of approved the experimental branch upstream, which will let us do some inference extension related development and release before KubeCon, and this was successful. So we can get some feedback. And actually, looks like some folks on Reddit and IBM, there's others, but like started to even use this, trying to use this even more. Um, which kind of related to the second bullet about release, but I'm going to get to it later. But I promise to kind of come with next steps because, this was a kind of prove this experimental. We may want to look at this as a project if this can be, kind of coupled with XProc if needed, or what kind of changes we want to do or propose to the upstream API and how do we want to do it within Istio. So I just wanted to kind of bring it up and say that are probably planning to kind of come with a, probably, correct me if I'm wrong, the right way here is just kind of come with a more, fleshed out document and present it in this forum and continue from there. So that's the first item. The second item is I'm probably going to need some help from some folks here with the releases while John is out. If we can get to this, I can add some link about who should have permissions to help me. But if we could, I've been trying for the last week, getting some help with no luck. So I'll add the link to the agenda where we can see who has the permissions. But yeah, that's what I had for today.
So I think I'm missing some context here. Does Istio already offer the support for the inference extension?
Yeah. So before KubeCon, we kind of approved the plan to do an upstream branch with the help from Louis and other people from the committee. And we have a branch called Experimental Istio Inference Extension. I'm pasting it here right now, which has the upstream support. And as I said, some folks have started using it. This was the main goal. And related, there was a breaking change in upstream, which broke a very important part of the supports. That's why I'm trying to help getting a fix released. It's already merged. So this is for context. And now we said we're going to follow up with plan to merge this to main and maybe coupled with some XProc standardization work, or like kind of more define how do we really want this API and the support to kind of come to main muster. Yeah.
So is the immediate ask for we're cutting a special release for this new version of API
so there is
inference off of the experimental branch, or is the ask for around merging to master and adding to the next Istio release?
So yeah, the ask is so there was already a release from the branch. I'll add more. So after I finish talking, I'll add more links here. John added a special project to be able to release from this experimental branch. So the ask is needing help with the release, and there's only, I think, Daniel from Solo as well, and John has access to do this release. So this is the first ask, so we can unblock other people that are using it, because we need to align with the breaking change that upstream API has done. And again, I'll add the issues here. And the second thing is more of like an informal, not informal, but like more informing is like I'm going to follow up with probably a doc, and I'm asking if this is the right way within this community. Probably a doc about like a more proper design and what is the path to merging this to main, and what changes do we even need. We kind of probably I can iterate on it.
Thank you.
If you want to go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'll go first then. Thank you. So I have
clarification question about the release. Are you thinking about releasing from your experimental branch to claim Istio maybe 25 or 26 experimental release or something? And my second question is a comment for Daniel. Daniel has been very, very busy because, as you know, he's the release manager for 126. I don't know if Daniel is here. That's another sign. If he's not here, he's super, super busy. So he's like doing large amount of work from the community already. So that may be why you are seeing some delay. I just want to explain he's doing a tons of work in the community already.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. So first, there is already a release from the experimental branch. I am pasting this is the tag, just for context, and I'm pasting it here while we're speaking. So just like, this is the already tag, and this was released from the branch I put above. Now for Daniel Day, obviously, no complaints for anyone. The only thing I do have is, if with the link I added, this link I'm highlighting here, there's only two people that are able to do it. There's Daniel and there is John, and most of them are probably not available. So yesterday you helped me as well getting Keith in, but someone still need to do Terraform apply to get this applied. Like, we just did the Git changes, and then Keith will be able to help. So the way it is released right now is John added a pro job, and this pro job needs to be manually applied. So someone, will do it manually and will not release automatically from this branch. And yeah, I would very much appreciate helping, because if not, we're kind of missing the point. We wanted to release something early to get early feedback from users, and we do have a good chunk of users again.
So can you clarify what are you releasing? That's, I think Mitch was trying.
So
I don't think everybody understood. Are you trying to release a refresh of your alpha build?
Yes. So this tag is cut off the branch before the fix was there, and now we aligned with the upstream change because they break changed us. And now I'm trying to fix this release. I'm not trying to do a stable Istio release. I'm just trying to release from this experimental branch.
Okay.
And this will be the fix. Yeah.
Sorry, can you explain what you mean by release?
What do you mean? Getting an Istio build? I mean, yeah, having an Istio build that is being able to, we're able to install with Istio Karo. So
I still don't get it. I mean, right now, if I check out, I run build and push, I create a release. I can push it through my own repository. That's a release, a build that anyone can use. Are you asking to have, to be in a particular repository? Are you asking it to be on some documentation or some site? So because any build is a release. I mean, you just put a tag. You don't even need a tag. You just build and it's done.
So you seeing the doc? Did you see the storage.googleapis.com bucket? I pasted.
I see.
And also,
you want it in the official bucket. That's what you mean by release.
Right. That's what I mean by release. Yes. And if you go to the Gateway Inference extension link I did there, so all the people that kind of coming to the website already reported it's broken. So how they use it is they use this tag, and then they use wget, unzip it, and then they do istio.ctl install with a tag and with the Istio testing branch bucket, and this is how it works for them. I don't want them to go to the branch and build them themselves and push it. I want them to.
Sorry, no. So let me try to explain. There is the whole release, official release, is special because the release managers do some magic. They are trusted. They build on a trust machine. They do all kind of special things to make it a blessed release that goes to the official repository. There is. But for an experimental branch, it's very reasonable to have a very low bar to release. I mean, you should be able to push a release whenever you feel necessary. You don't need a release manager or something like that. I mean, the problem is that the buckets that we use for official releases has a different bars and a different buckets that normally use for testing and for other purposes. I mean, the automatic push and that is done on every build can be used as a release, or you can have some intermediary. So my So very static. Let me try to join again.
We can hear, just want to let you know there is
Yeah.
some noise or static.
Okay, sorry, I'll try to speak. So my point here is that I completely agree. We need to have a very easy process to release from a branch. I don't know if that release should go into the official, in the same bucket with the official releases, but I'm fine with that as well. But you should be able to push releases whenever you want, as often as you want from experimental branches. We cannot use the same process for experimental release as we do for an official release.
Yes, and thanks, Costin. And there is a separate process. This process was created in the Istio testing for PR I just linked. There is a separate job, and everything is separate. Like John did a good job setting everything separately. The only thing that we need help is having a person with permissions, and that's my only problem. Louis?
Yeah, I mean, we should obviously diversify the permissions. I don't think it makes sense to just have two people. That's a very low bus number for this type of thing. Yeah, we should facilitate this. This is something that Istio project has decided it wants to do. We wanted to provide an early release build. It's obviously an API in transition. We're motivated to help Lior get this out. I don't see any reason not to do it. So I'll follow up offline to find out, but we should try and diversify the permissions, particularly across vendors here too, by the way, right? Seeing as both John and Daniel work at Solo. Lior, you mentioned you were trying to get Keith to have permissions. Is that correct?
Yes, I did, and Lynn helped me yesterday. She approved the PR getting kit, but someone need to Terraform apply it in order for it to be applicable.
Okay, and I don't claim to know the ins and outs of it either, seeing as I don't have permissions. But we obviously need to get that done, and the TOC should facilitate that.
Shouldn't you have permission, Lior? I mean,
I don't think
would
he's
love to have permissions, but I'm a Istio newbie member probably, so
yeah,
I didn't
he's not
get
even
this yet.
he's not a maintainer yet. Costin, you should have permissions.
yeah, I need to have the permission, but since he's working, I mean, I think we can get him into maintainers if it's important work. It's a large chunk of work.
Yeah, I just don't want to change the we have to maintain the rules about what it takes to become a maintainer. We should check. You're on the TOC, Costin, so can you follow up and make sure to see if Lior has met the maintainer bar? And then if he has, then I don't see any objection.
Yeah. That would be ideal. I mean, if I mean, he submitted quite a few PRs for this branch, and we should.
Those are contributions. So let's just resolve this. We can take it up in the TOC channel. We'll try.
I'll sweat a little bit more, and then we can follow up.
Sure. Yeah, send 2 more PRs and. But I think that we are in complete agreement, Louis. I mean, we need to, have an easy process for experimental branches to be released.
Yeah, and we do so, or at least easier-ish modulo permissions.
Okay.
So yeah, Costin, you should probably get permissions too.
Yeah, if you can get me permissions, then I can do your release earlier until you get maintainer.
Yeah, the thing is, so sorry it's taking too long. Maybe probably shouldn't move forward to Jackie's stuff, but the thing I'm trying to say is I'm happy to also add you, Costin. The only thing we need is either Daniel or John, because they're the only admins to do PF apply. Without it, we're stuck. So, so I don't see any other way of how we could do it. I know Daniel's pretty busy, but again, it's just another Terraform apply command, and I didn't ask him to do the release, so I'll appreciate if you could follow up and get him to do it, because it's already a week where everyone's broken.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Lynn, we can take that up with Daniel. He should at least be able to give people permissions.
Yeah, Yeah,
thanks.
oh, yeah. I don't believe Daniel has the issue with giving people permissions, but I do know he's super busy, and there's some upcoming holiday coming up in Europe for his location too. I think might be tomorrow and Friday. So I do think if anybody has like knowledge of PROW, this is the area we definitely love contributions. I think Google, you have some expertise in this area, so definitely would be happy to onboard you.
Sergey should have permissions, Costin.
Yeah, Sergey should definitely have permission.
Can you follow
Mitch,
with him?
Mitch, do you mind opening the also need help with release link so we can show everyone who has permissions?
Yes.
Uh,
So this is who has permissions as controlled by Terraform. But I do think, at least when I was at Google, I had access to some things that were not necessarily labeled in the
Well,
open source repo.
Well, potentially, I mean, maybe, I mean, I'm not sure how it works right now. I definitely don't have any, but I do see, like before my PR yesterday to add Keith, which again, it's not applicable yet because nobody applied it. And I saw Daniel's was added 2 weeks ago. And if someone added it with Terraform, so it's probably, even if someone else had permission, it's probably overridden it. So yeah, we'll probably need either Daniel or John to do the Terraform apply if I understand the process correctly. And I feel like
and
I understand it.
I suspect Sergey has, I mean, Google is using a different bucket, so it's not the same thing.
So yeah, these are the people.
Do we know what this controls? This controls just the permissions to write to the storage bucket.
Yeah, so if you search the,
Okay.
I mean, you search the Terraform infra admins, and then you see what it controls, and maybe it controls even not just the experimental bucket. If it controls this way, we may want to split it or something. But I believe we don't mind giving Keith permissions or costing, so therefore I don't see a reason to split it.
Theoretically, you could use the Google bucket. I mean, it's but yeah, let's fix it the way we discussed. Okay, sounds good.
It sounds good. So I think Daniel just joined. I want Daniel to speak up and also bring you up to speed. So Daniel, I don't know when you joined, but I think your comment is very important in the chat, right? This was asked 2 hours ago. Now it's bringing up to the meeting. And as I explained to everybody, Daniel has been super, super busy. So there's no disagreement giving whoever needs the permission, as long as we trust the people to do the work. That's totally cool with everybody here.
Okay.
The
On the
ask
second
was
part-
2 hours ago, so I mean, just a little bit of leeway would be appreciated.
Yeah, and Daniel, what we're looking at, we know you are very busy. We're looking at enable more people to do the work.
Mhm.
Google already have a lot of expertise with info and PROW. So, and I know in the past you also complained to me like the limited set of people who can do the work. So this is a good time to onboard more people.
No, I agree.
So
Nice
the
having
second part,
conversations.
which is perhaps more important about merging to upstream. What is the plan and how, I mean, are we going to do it incremental one by one with an API for enabling X.Z and so forth, Xproc and so forth?
Can we see a
Yes.
demo of this work, by the way? I just requested access for the design doc. I believe it was presented while I was traveling, so I hadn't really had a lot of chance. Mitch was asking about this feature, so that means at least 2 TOC members are not very familiar with it. I do think it's a significant and hot feature that deserves maybe a presentation and demo to talk about it in a dedicated meeting, in my opinion, because it's significant. And then we should also discuss what's the plan to merge. How can we maybe dark launch or have people use this?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Lynn. Costin, just quick question. I just gave you permission, Lynn. I had all dev at Kubernetes.io permissions. So sorry for not having you before. Yeah, I'm not going to take a lot of time on it. So what I ask for this is I'm planning to come up with a doc, which I presume this is the current process, and then we can iteratively talk about the document. And yeah, if this is the current process, so instead of spending time right now, I'm gonna put a doc how I think we should merge the upstream, and then we're probably gonna get feedback from Louis, from everyone, from John. Yeah.
You know, my ask was slightly different than Lina. I mean, what I'm interested in is the API surface for enabling XProc, and the series of API changes that you need. I mean, it's one thing, the implementation and the implementation branches is one problem, but the other is to have to make sure we are not getting back into we have a lot of discussion about envoy filters and other stuff, and how to properly expose. So I want to make sure the XProc filter is properly
Right. So right now, to clarify, right now the implementation does not have any XProc API, like public API. So the way we do it is by customize some names of internal HTTP routes. There is going to be a section in the doc I'm going to share about the potential interlink work with, like, explicitly doing an XProc API, and I hope to get this discussed there, and then we can decide, hey, this can only be merged to main if we have a public XProc API. We're probably going to make the things much more simple, because we're going to do like gateway API, translating the inference API to Istio APIs. But again, I'm expecting this to be discussed there, and we can evaluate whether this is needed or encouraged or not. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we have a couple of pattern options here, right? We have the existing pattern we use in auth-z, right? The provider pattern, which is an integration pattern with X to auth-z already. And we could leverage that for XProc as well without requiring a fully qualified XProc API that subsumes what we would do with Envoy filter for that case, I think, Austin. So we can have a simpler API discussion. That's one option. The other option is obviously to have a much more complicated XProc API discussion along the lines of the WASM filter, right? And all of that entails, as well as trying to bring WASM filter up to speed with the gateway API, which would probably be quite a long and complicated discussion. Worthwhile, but maybe we could decouple those two things or have two designs. That's kind of how I think about it, but yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate this. Some of these discussions are not like I wasn't a part of, so I appreciate these links, and also I'm happy to kind of push for WASM filters and gateway API related stuff. But yeah, these are the kind of discussions I'm expecting to have, and see what's the best path. Yeah, right now we kind of bypass any Istio public API, and we just do it internally, which is very hacky, but we have been done some things worse than this in the past. So yeah.
But my point is we need to have the discussion about because you are enabling XProc in your implementation, and you are not. It's not. I cannot believe that you will be the only user of XProc in the universe. So there will be some other parts of Istio that will need the XProc, and we have a mess with envoy filters. We have something maybe decent with X.z, but is not sufficient. We have already three things, and we need to have the discussion about how we want to move forward, and maybe that will be the path we use to filter to fix some of the filter problems that we have. I mean,
well, so Custom, I suspect what we did for X.z will work for this, because it's a much more well-defined use case than the general purpose envoy filter thing, right? Which is like, hey, you can do anything anywhere. This is a lot more constrained than that. That's not to say that we still don't have a more general purpose XProc thing, although XProc itself is by definition, or should be, more constrained than envoy filter, right? It should be more like X-auth than like WASM, because WASM can also do anything, right?
I completely agree. No, I completely agree with that. That would be my choice as well, to extend the X.z. I mean, to use the same pattern as we use for X.z.
Yeah, because it should imply little to no API change.
Exactly.
So I'm writing 2 action items. One is creating the doc, share it, and get some links, and starting discussion there for merging this to main. And the other item is following up afterwards about the permissions, hoping to get either Keith or someone else also have to be able to help with the release.
Yeah, and then the third thing, Lior, because I know you talked to John a lot about this, at some point we want to get back into main, right, in a flag guarded or environment variable guarded state. So we're like any other dev feature. right? And we don't have branches. It's not urgent. And I know John had some concerns about the current state of the implementation that he was looking for improvements on. But that would be the third AI, is to have a plan for that.
Yeah, I was planning to kind of get this doc with a hope, like
Yeah,
how
okay.
will we get in? But then here's the, here's like, maybe we can do it with the Auth, maybe we can do it with, what wasm, like, not wasm, Xproc API, whatever, and then hoping to like first implement in the branch and then like kind of follow up with main if it's stable. And we're lucky to have, again, I don't want to miss the train. We have some Reddit folks and IBM research folks who really can use it. So, and yeah, if they're using it, so will give us feedback.
Great. Okay.
All right. Next up on the agenda comes from Jackie, requesting reviews on a pull request related to the multi-network control plane for ambient. See if we can shorten that link. Let's go ahead and place that with that. What is a chip? Oh, okay. Chips work. Keith, do you know if Jackie had any active conversations she wanted to see happen today, or?
Hey, I think
just
Jackie
put
had
a
to drop in.
TSC stand.
Yeah,
Oh,
Keith is
sorry.
not here either. I did
Oh.
review. I put a comment 5 days ago. Haven't got a question. And Louis, I think I tagged you. I also tagged Steven from Solo to review because he has a lot of experience on this domain.
Jackie has nicely bugged me. I was out on vacation last week, so I'm trying to catch up, but it's on my to-do list for today, or at worst tomorrow. Jackie should feel free to harass me again if I'm not responsive by the end of the week.
Thanks, appreciate it. I'll pass it along.
Yeah. Do you want to pull up the PR? We could. There's no reason not to look at it. I would just go look at the changes. Just the protobuf, I guess. Yeah. Oh, this is to define the service scope, whether it's global or local. Yep.
Yeah, and what I'm having trouble to understand is this described on the service or also on the namespace? I think it's both. And
this is both, right?
Yeah, so I'm not sure, if we had enough thoughts on how do we handle conflicts, which one is going to win and all that.
Well, I assume, Lynn, it's additive only, right? So it's anything that's selected will get the most permissive scope, right? So if something is both local and global, then it's global.
Can you disable it though? Is the value only for true?
I'm working on something that's very similar in default enablement for ambient. That was modifying the label selector so you don't have to say data plane mode is ambient or is ambient. And what I used there, we should probably use, well, I'll say first of all, we should probably use something consistent for both ambient enablement and for service exporting multi-cluster. I used an array of tuples of label selectors because label selectors inherently don't have the ability to or between them. You can only add and clauses. And so that follows the template set for us also in mutating webhook configs, which was, of course, how we originally did mesh enablement, is that you had an array of label selectors, one for the pod and one for the namespace, or tuples, array of tuples of label selectors, a namespace and a pod, and you needed to match any entry in that array. And that allows us to do things like the namespace says ambient and the pod doesn't say none. Because if the pod does say none, it really doesn't matter what the namespace says. This pod should not be included in the mesh. So I will work with Jackie and or Keith to come to a consensus on a structure, a shared structure for these label selectors. My guess is that we're going to need an array. I'm thinking that just a flat tuple is probably not going to be sufficient for us.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, either we're always going to need an array of selectors for positive inclusion. I guess the question is, do you want to use something as complex as match expression, right? So you can do exclusions, right? So ors are always hard, or do you want to do ands and nots, right? It's basically your choice. But I agree with that in principle, Mitch.
Also, I think the other question is, I agree with your consistency point, Mitch. I think I like that a lot. The other question I have is, does it make sense to start with doing this on the namespace? I think doing this on the service, allow user to select on the service makes a lot of sense. But I almost feel the namespace one would not be the first choice for a lot of people. So if so, I wonder if we should even support that, because the fact that if we support both, we have to think through, how do we handle conflicts? User have to read like 5x more documents to use this because the fact that we support both.
Why'd you say that, Lynn? Like service is just like namespace is container of service.
Right, but would you actually declare this on the namespace level? What are the chances you would put every single services as global in your namespace? Versus I'm going to be very selective on these are the one service or two services. I'm going to make it a global out of my namespace. Think about it. If you enable this on a namespace level, the next day you deploy another service, boom, that's magically global, and you may not want that.
Well, so I think I guess it would be nice to see the list of most common selection patterns as a kind of functional requirement. So like, what do we think they are? Every service with this label, right, is probably pattern number 1, right?
Right, and that's what I'm proposing to introduce. Start there, not adding a complexity. I'll let you finish. Sorry.
Well, I think pattern number 2 is every namespace with this label.
But I don't think that's a common scenario. That's what I'm trying to say. We're introducing may not be needed, and it adds 5x complexity to our doc, because right now when I read this doc, I have to process what Jackie meant to, and how is this handles wins on both, who is going to win, my head has to spin. If we just do it on service, I don't need to spin my head.
So the reason why I say that one, Lynn, and it's everything is global except a set of well-known infrastructural namespaces by default. That's the use case. So let's say like I have a Prometheus namespace, a Splunk namespace, right? Like 5 or 6 infrastructural namespaces, and then everything else all the time in all my clusters is global.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I think is what we do today in sidecar mode, right?
Yes, that is what we do today. So the question there then is, what the best way to express that is to say not these namespaces, and then select all namespaces, right? That's how you would most succinctly say that and have it be what you wanted. Now, if this API can't say that, then we need to adjust this API. But I think those are the 2 most common cases, right? Everything is global by default except infrastructural things, or just specific services. Is there a third common pattern we expect to see?
When nothing is global by default, and
yeah, but that's already covered, right?
Yeah,
implicitly,
of
right?
course. No, but Louis, I mean, do you think it's having an infrastructure namespace is more common than having infrastructure service? Because even for Splunk example, or even for a lot of other things, I mean, in Istio system, we have various things. In Splunk, they have multiple things. It's not. I think services, specific services that are is more common and simpler.
So certainly, it may be that service, like I select all services except infrastructural ones, is roughly the equivalent of I select all namespaces except infrastructural ones, right? The question there is which is more succinct and maintainable. Either way, we need an exclude, right? We need a not.
Well, there's also consistency to keep in mind. We have other APIs that are using label selectors at the namespace and the sub namespace level, whether we're talking workload or gateway or service or whatever.
Right, like,
and those
like
for backward
enabling
compatibility
ambient.
purposes, those must have a list of pod and namespace selectors that are ORed together, because there's no way to express our historical behavior outside of that construct.
Yeah, so I tend to agree with Mitch here. Like, mesh enablement itself has a namespace selection mechanism today, right? Ambient mode enabled on the namespace. So if we're going to maintain consistency about selection here with that mechanism, those APIs are going to look the same.
But I think mesh enablement is different than here, because mesh enablement, you don't want to make any changes to your app, and you don't want to touch anything, right? So in that case, namespace makes sense, and then you only need, so you would expect people to use namespace by default, and you know, you deal with pod on a case-by-case needed basis.
Right, but almost nobody does, Lynn, right?
Right. So I'm just saying, in that case, namespace is the default. But in this case, I expect most people use service, because it's out of like 1,000 services on the cluster. I don't expect most people would expose all the services to be global. I expect a selective services to be exposed.
We just said the opposite, right? Like we said, the primary use case is specific services, but the second most common use case, and the one that's default in Sidecar today, is every service except some well-known ones. Right,
Yeah,
everything's global all the time.
We already have that's implemented in Sidecar. The ambient is
But yeah, I understand, but like that semantic of I want everything to be global all the time, right, is actually sensible, right? There are people who want to operate that way.
Well, I would hate to break that use case for users looking to migrate from Sidecar to ambient this year, and say now you've got to go label every service individually in order to get your use case to work.
Remember, the reason we want so we want ambient to be default. The user should not even have namespace. It should be on by default unless you opt in to have sidecars or to have nothing. The reason we can never have Istio by default is because it breaks in subtle ways if you some services. So if you don't test your service is able to deal with the global state, you cannot. If you enable ambient, you're going to be screwed, because you're suddenly some new service that you didn't consider when you label the namespace. It's added. It's a new service, and that service is not able to. Is not good. It's not working. So what Lynn is saying, it's both simpler and safer, because it's owner of the service that is the only one who knows if their service is capable of not capable of.
Well, it's not safer. Right, like it's a different in like an expression, but if I have the rule, all services except some well-known ones, then if a new service comes in, it will become global.
I know, but the owner of this is a person who's writing that service.
I know, I understand, but like the admin, right? So the person who owns the platform, not us, has made that decision for their company.
But can you make a decision that all services are global? I mean, in Google or any other company, can you make a decision and have that decision work? It's not. It's even because it's the code that you write.
We run the world's largest and most successful multi-cluster service mesh with sidecars, and it absolutely works that way. So yes, you can definitely do that at a large company in production and at scale.
Yeah, people are doing that today. Like, if you are consistent with how you write services and you're not susceptible to the problems of your service oscillating between local and global custom, which there are some companies like that, yes.
My assertion is that most people who do that have subtle bugs that they don't know why they happen when they
hit and then they would need to make some adjustment, right? Then they would need to opt it out, right?
So I wonder if maybe we can divide this into two kind of horizons. One is, what should we set these selectors as a default? If you just install ambient multi-cluster, what selectors work out of the box? And in that case, maybe we say it's explicitly services only.
Service opt-in. Yeah, I would agree with by default. Well, service opt-in will make sense.
What I don't want to say is we will not permit users to do namespace opt-in. If they want to do namespace opt-in, they can modify the selectors that represent this config. And then they can use namespace.
and allow users to do service opt-out.
Yes.
Okay, then it's fine. I mean, if you
Yeah,
have
I'm
a
cool with
granularity
that
of
too.
service, my concern was to be able to have by default off and service level on and off somehow. Having the namespace plus or minus is just complexity, but that's fine. It's not really a big deal. It may help in some cases. Okay, that works.
I'm good with that. So basically, the default doesn't have the complexity we were concerned with, but if you're in one of the special cases, you can enable the complexity.
So yeah, I think we need to be much more explicit about what the default is here, right? Like if none of this is specified, what happens? Like, should there be an actual default?
I think that's the Istio.io/global on your service. So the moment you put that label on your service, declare it's global, then it's global, right?
Yeah,
So that's the default.
But the documentation here should say that if this field is not specified, this is the logical equivalent match expression.
So,
Well, I think we should talk about where that default is implemented. Whether it's implemented in, like, for instance, in Helm charts would be a perfectly fine place to implement the default so that it's always specified.
Yeah. Not everybody uses Helm.
Well, because a label selector that is empty has an implicit value of select all. So
global, it's in Istio mesh configure some other place. It doesn't have to be explicit necessarily a configuration. It's when you install Istio, you can set it. It's not.
I guess what I'm saying is I don't want to compare to the zero value label selector and say, if you've done a zero value label selector, then we're going to have this other behavior, because that's an actual meaningful thing that the customer could express.
Right, but that's different than a zero value service scope resource.
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah. But the question is where you are coming from and what's your goal. So if you are coming from adopting Istio from normal, not having used Istio before, and you are adopting ambient, the correct value for the default is disabled, and then you opt in namespaces or services. If you're
the correct value by default is service select label match istio.io.global.
Yes. Right, but I think Austin said is also right. If you don't have that label, then you're not going global. You're only going global when you have that label.
Yeah, no, that's basically saying that the selection, what the equivalent in this API is select on istio.io.global.
Yes. So you explicitly opt in individual services because you didn't have before. You didn't.
Yeah, that's service opt-in.
Once you test all the services that are you make sure that all services are global, you can change the default on the mesh. You have the policy in place. All the teams are aware. If you are coming from Istio sidecar and you had everything, as you said, with global and already designed and tested, then you can have the default to be global by default.
Right, which then it's empty label selector.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's good. I think everyone is happy.
Except we need to change this API in the documentation. So I guess, Mitch, you're going to follow up with Jackie.
Yes.
Based on the discussion we just had.
Yeah, kind of. I see two horizons. One is kind of unifying with mesh enablement in terms of the semantics of how these label selectors are specified, and then the second is expressly setting a default that is the services labeled with Istio.io global.
And having far more documentation about when it is safe to make something global and when it is not safe, because we kind of marketed global but we haven't. I don't think we have enough emphasis on the risks of a service having state and breaking in subtle ways, because most of the time you get the local and it works, but then you know the problem, but it's not clear if you read the documentation today.
Yeah, I mean, we probably also need to say something about stateful sets here.
It's any state. It's not. It's a mistake to think it's stateful. Anything that is any database, anything that it's local.
Yeah, no, the documentation of the label, the documentation of this API needs to be significantly more thorough. And we need to deal with the upgrade case, right? Sidecars. So just on the namespace specific part, Mitch, I would be okay as long as we had like exclude, right? So if this a service selection only with exclude on service selection, that would be fine by me. The only thing I would say there is it may be easier to identify infrastructural namespaces to exclude than infrastructural services to exclude, right? Because they
Right.
should be segmented by namespace. So I suspect we still want namespace, but on the positive selection side for things to make global, I could go either way. I suspect it's probably useful. So yeah,
Well,
just
fortunately, label selector encapsulates all of that. You can do both match labels and match expressions within a label selector.
yeah, you can do a lot.
Do we have any plan to have the ambient enabled by default?
Yeah, Costin, you're talking about like not needing to
enablement.
label namespaces with data
Exactly.
plane mode ambient.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can send you my pull request. I would love a review on it. With John out, the reviews have all slowed down. And mine is by no means the oldest PR that needs a review, but it's the one I
I'll
care
spend
about.
some time. We just had a release recently, so I didn't have.
Yep.
But
No, I'm not complaining. Like mine,
my-
like I said, mine is not doing too bad,
Yeah.
but I'll send it to you. And if you want to have a look.
what I want to confirm is that with this mode, which I think is very important because that's the easiest way to adopt, we have globally soft in this mode. So when you have ambient by default, you need to do something else to switch to this mode where cluster is global.
You're saying that the label used for enabling or disabling ambient is not the same as the set for expressing global.
Yes,
services.
different. So as a new user, which is just not having used Sidecar before, I install Istio. I have ambient by default, and if I want to opt into this global, I either do service by service test or I explicitly opt into this global mode with a separate flag.
Yeah. So.
Oh, yeah.
But the default will certainly be different options. The Helm expression will be different options. The user could always set those label selectors to the same thing if they chose to, and I can't prevent them, or at least I don't want to prevent them from doing that.
Documentation is enough. I mean, having clear
Yeah.
documentation that if you are not sure, just start with this mode. Don't bother with per namespace labels or anything. So just install Istio with this flag and then later decide what you want to make global.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think Jackie got all the feedback she was looking for, just not while she was here. Did we record this? We did.
Yes, and I'll make sure it gets posted.
We did, and I think Craig has some automation going on, so it's actually automate uploading to YouTube.
Nice.
That's very cool.
I've stumbled across the lack of that before. That's exciting. That's great.
That's
Right,
what I
so-
heard, but I think he did it on one of the other project we had. So let me double check now. So I think he did
Right, well-
both.
So we have 7 minutes left. Mitch, you talked about the enablement stuff. I presume that has an API change. PR, do we want to review that?
It does not. So the API for enablement is not expressed anywhere in our CRDs.
Not in mesh config?
Nope. The only utility that needs to know about enablement is the CNI. So the way that I've got the PR written right now is the same way that we configure anything else for the CNI. We pass it in through environment variables to the CNI daemon set.
And it's a bunch
As I
of
understand
selected.
it, mesh config is generally for things that need to be accessed from multiple layers, Istio plus CNI plus proxy or something along those lines.
Yeah, though it is nice having schema.
So it is
document.
explicitly following the Kubernetes label selector schema.
Yeah, no, yeah. See, you have an API. Okay, first question. How is that API going to be documented?
The same way we document all of our Helm install options.
Okay. I'm trying to parse that in my head.
So let's say we added a mesh config API. The user could then dynamically change the configuration or the selectors without restarting CNI, which is interesting, but also a little bit scary. But they would still express them primarily through Helm, right? Like that's the API that most users use to modify any mesh-wide settings.
Yeah. I mean, the Helm interface is reasonable.
Well, and if you didn't express them through Helm and then you run a Helm install, it's going to clobber the changes
Sure.
to
Yeah. Like
mesh config.
It's the dynamism, right? And then just the best practice around documentation.
Yeah.
Leaving aside the dynamism, because that's obviously a very fraught technical subject on its own.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess we'll just have to take a look at what the doc looks like to see. It's quite a complicated API to encapsulate in Helm.
Yeah, so I mean, what I would like to do is add documentation in addition to the what's inline in Helm to describe some patterns, and probably it's not in this PR, but probably add some Helm. I'd call them aliases for common patterns, like an opt-out pattern. Costin talked about default enablement. While my PR enables you to create label selectors that do default enablement, we should have a prescriptive enable ambient by default flag or some other name that sets those to a known working value, particularly because the interaction between pod labels and namespace labels has nuance that is not always apparent at first.
Yeah, so I guess you're going to have this derivative API, like well-known label for opt-out.
Yep.
Right, in the case where someone wants opt-in by default.
Yep. So that most users aren't actually modifying the label selectors themselves. That's considered a pretty advanced scenario.
Yeah. Okay. Have you picked a label?
So by default, it uses the existing labels. The data plane, what is it? Istio.io/data plane equals ambient or equals none.
Okay, so it's if absence implies enabled and none implies disabled.
Yes. So when we go to an opt-out model, I would imagine using data plane none as the default for the opt-out model. And then again, users can run with that as far as they want.
Okay.
Let me share that here in the chat so that anyone interested can take a look. Since we've been talking about it.
I dump it in ambient dev so it survives this meeting, which is about to end.
Good point. I will do that. Wow, we went beyond our agenda, took on additional topics, and we're still going to land the plane on time. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's good that there's direct technical stuff to talk about. And,
yeah.
And not just process stuff. Sorry, Lior. Okay. Cool.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
See you guys next week.
Everyone. See ya.
Okay, all.